The way I remember what happened, besides the staff part, David, and you can put that part into, I was on the phone with you, and I came to that phone call, Toshi, with my normal, like, I'm going to take care of this artist. I'm going to come and assure this artist that we are going forward. There is no worries. We're going. And this was like Tuesday, the 10th of March. Like, this was like just the minute before everything fell apart. And I was still in a place of, Toshi, this is all going to be fine. And as I remember it, you said, yes, I appreciate it. I'm ready to do it. I'm excited to do it. And also, what if we didn't do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then what if we instead listened to the work? And does that resonate with you as to your experience of the call?
Yeah, I think I just really was thinking about the work itself, you know, Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and Octavia Butler's Parable of the Talents. And the book that didn't come out, Octavia Butler's Parable of the Trickster. And I was thinking about togetherness and what it means to be together. This is an event on the entire planet. And I think we've been living under events for the entire planet forever, but I think, you know, we've fallen into the idea around the borders, you know, that have been like, you know, created over time, and the countries and the systems that administrate the different countries. But we've had a climate crisis on Earth for a long time now, and that climate crisis doesn't see borders or anything. It's, you know, yeah. So it's clearly time for all humans to have a different understanding of togetherness. And when I felt your energy, which I thought was spectacular and wonderful, I also was like, but what about if we could do this? You know, because this would put us in a practice of our togetherness in a way that humans usually don't use.
Yeah.
And so that was my feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love go ahead, David, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so I was, prior to this call that you and David had, we had earlier that morning shared with our staff our intention around we are going to go forward. And I kept using the term, we're trying to create some sense of normalcy in a very abnormal time. And that just hit as flat as a brick. You know, I mean, people were like, oh, no, you cannot actually say normalcy in these times. And here I thought I was balancing these things. So prior to your call with David, we just had this moment with the staff. We practice a lot of what we call shared leadership, where they were giving us very candid feedback around some of the decisions that we were presenting to them. And I was listening deeply and feeling their own anxiety and their own sense of their notion of our betrayal of our own values in just plowing through. And so I'm overhearing your call with David in my office, and I'm like processing, okay, what did we just hear? And if we ignore what we're hearing from our team around the values that we are actually fronting and presenting as the leaders of this organization, like, where do we stand in that? And so it was quite fortuitous that these things were happening in separate offices, side by side. Your transformational inspirational call with David, my sort of sitting in this, oh my God, what do we think we're doing? David came into the office and we were kind of right lockstep in sync with each other in that moment. And again, so the universe telling you to do what you should be doing, and also our staff not having the depth of wisdom and the depth of wisdom and inspiration from Octavia Butler's sort of scholarship and research and writings, but totally feeling it in their own right. And those two things coming together, being like, yeah, we're crazy if we think we're just kind of like business as usual. So it was really a pretty miraculous day. And then it completely shifted, which was amazing for our staff to also experience, that we said a thing, we heard a thing, we listened, we responded differently. The artists were telling us, you know, because we believe that artists are the gatekeepers of truth, right? You guys will lead us. So we're putting those things together, and it completely shifted that whole day for us in a way that felt completely right to say that we were completely wrong, you know. So it was pretty spectacular.
Wow. Well, I mean, I think that's what, the world needs more processes like that, I think. But we don't all know everything, and we don't, and we're led by, most of us, like by our hearts and by our desires. And that's along the spectrum, just different for everybody, and when there's a common call, when there's like such a powerful common call, it's a unique situation. And I think, people on the earth are afraid of those situations, and I don't blame them, because people have not been treated well with common calls. Common calls are usually really violent, really destructive, taking something away from people. It can happen on a dime. Yeah. Like, things can feel like you're holding, and then things can change really, really quickly. There's multiple well-documented, really vicious moves on the earth by humans that would make you not trust a moment like this to be something positive. Right. It's a lot of reason to be like, we're going to carry on. And I really feel that, and it's not even like about normal, but it's just like in the smallest ways that we handle anxiety and things that are not, sure, is like, well, if I'm working, it's not happening, or if I'm really quiet, the plane won't crash, just the ways we do things. And I think the earth has been begging us to stop and consider our places on it, and to consider all of the breathing and living elements of the earth. But for humans, incredibly, this is such an opportunity for us to deal with our destructive tendencies and our overuse of resources on the planet, and the ways we don't love ourselves. And, I think sometimes things feel so big and out of touch. And if you had to solve every single thing, one, you first would have to agree on what to solve. And then you'd have to agree on how to solve it. And then you have to make all these agreements. But I think sometimes we can just say, well, what is being offered? And right now what's being offered is a gigantic pause to save people from getting sick and dying.
You've said in an email, Toshi, that I've been reading to the staff in all different iterations and sending it around to different people on campus. You said that you hear a lot of talk about the apocalypse, and you don't mind contemplating the end, but you're not here for the apocalypse. that this is our moment, and this is our time, and we're going to walk together into a future, not an apocalypse.
Yeah, I know there's a love of, I love some of the things that people are writing, and I love the openness of talking about it. But I think, I'm not here for it. And I'm not so much excited and loving, all the conversations of it enough where I'm like, well, then let's just all do whatever we want to do and be how we want to be. The idea of apocalypse, like the end of the earth, the end of time, the end of everything. I think there's been so many ends and so many horrific ends on the planet by humans. I'm like, no, you don't get to have the excuse of the apocalypse to behave in whatever way you want to. And whether the earth will contain us as humans, because the earth will contain itself, but whether the earth will contain us as humans is really, we need to show some reason for the earth to contain us. We need to make and broadcast on another level to be in alignment with the earth. And so I think sometimes people think like, oh, it's happening. And I'm like, but you're still getting delivery,
Right.
We're still having a simple conversation around plastic bags, like we're still, you know, like, no, it's
Yeah.
not yet. So there are people on the planet, and there always have been people on the planet that live in conditions that are so horrible. Like none of us can tolerate them, and those people can't tolerate them.
Right.
And we allow it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm suggesting is that this is an actual opportunity, because the wealth on the planet is there. It's not like we don't have wealth. We design this system. We design an economic system like this. So it's not like we don't have enough to be brilliant about our care and how we are on the earth. It's that all of us are not in agreement that that's how we should live and exist on the planet. And so that is a constant and consistent war that humans have played on the earth since we got here. Yeah. And I think we are the generation with so much information. Like we actually have understanding of resources. We have experts in science. We've been to space. We have seen the universe. We have, we've done all of these things. We have several different practices around wellness. We have all of these things. We have this song in Parable, what you gonna do when the world's on fire? And I'm like, the world is on fire. And like, let's do what we actually have to do. And I think what we also have is like our gigantic emotional selves. And we have our, I don't know about you, but I like what I like and I want what I want. And I like what I like and I want what I want all the time.
Right. When I want it.
I want it, yeah. I'm not always in alignment with my family, let alone the planet.
Yeah.
So I think like this is an amazing time to not only execute this, this indoor life, which I hope is the right thing to do, and which I hope will help us, in our healing from this worldwide virus, but it should do other things. We should not go back exactly to the way things were before. Absolutely. We should not accept the same low-level outcome of mainstream news. We should not accept the same boundaries of executing our election. Republican, Democrat, watch the debates, we should get out there and vote and vote and vote and vote, but like vote with our foot on the throats of the American government system. That, this is the time to calibrate your life in a way that makes sense to not just your existence, but to the existence of your children and of your children's children and of that tree across the street. And what I think Octavia Butler was saying to everyone is that, we can make decisions intentionally, not like when everything is terrible and awful and we feel overwhelmed, but as a practice of our lives all the time. And if we don't have a line that says we're not going to kill each other, we're not going to steal from each other, we're going to watch out for each other, these things that feel like not significant. But if we don't carry those with us, then we will all be systemic in acts of wars for the rest of the time. Yeah. And that's the big, beautiful moment of togetherness that we're in. And that's, I hope it won't happen too much, but we should take full advantage of it happening now.
Yeah. David, go.
Yeah, I just want to go back to something you said earlier about the moment and a call to pause. And I would love to hear more about what that pause is, because my sense is that we get in this moment, there's something we're supposed to be learning here, because you talk about, and I agree that we shouldn't come out on the other side the same way that we went into it. But what does this pause require of us? And so what are the things that we should be learning in this? Because I just said to our staff, our tendency is to try to be even more productive as we're working from home, which creates a different kind of burnout. We're trying to even do more programming in this moment of craziness. busyness to sort of meet the people. And there's this balance of being able to move forward and plan for the return, but also taking enough time to pause. And how do you think about both pausing and acting, in this kind of sort of on fire moment?
Yeah, I mean, well, beautifully, I feel like you answered that when you came on, when you said, I love teachers. Teachers are amazing, and I think like what this is causing us to do is realize some of the perfection in the systems we have already that we've taken for granted. And education is like so important, all kinds of education. Education you get from your friends and your grandparents and your, education that comes through music, education that comes through art. But teachers are like the neglected workforce on the planet that have so much responsibility. Oh my God, they're supposed to know all of this information that they can pass on to teachers, the students, and then they're supposed to watch your kids. And, everybody's upset. Well, who's going to watch my kids? And then you go away. Like something about those words, like school, classroom, teacher, make you go away and you go do your job and you just expect it's to be handled, but it's a disintegrating system. The level of violence that's happening in schools is like, if you need nothing else, like if you need to know nothing else, every person in America must know that the government does not care if kids get shot in school. Like, it is just true. There's no way you can look at it any other way. Government don't care if you in a restaurant eating dinner that you get shot. Government don't care if you in the grocery store, you get shot. Government don't care what you doing and you get shot. Does not care. Every single person who has been elected to office has a level of don't care, because they have not done everything they possibly could do to stop it. They haven't. They just haven't. And if you know that, then you know what they think of teachers. You are the thing that holds a position that allows us to control a structure of education so that we can run whatever economic systems that we are running through the whole thing. And as community people, if you look at Black people in this country, Black people were not, you're brought here, you are in such a level of torture, you don't have language for it, and yet we actually created language for it. And we created a way to communicate what we needed to house ourselves in conditions that no one should ever experience, right? Then it's like, you're a Christian, and it's like, you can have the Bible, but you can't read, you can't write. And it's hundreds of years of this. Yeah. And my mom has a teacher, Mrs. Daniels. I don't know, I never met Mrs. Daniels, obviously. Mrs. Daniels taught my mom in the 40s, but Mrs. Daniels is a saint. She's a god. She had one classroom. She negotiated education during a horrible time in our country for Black people. She taught, all the grades of kids in one room. She got milk for the kids every day. For some reason, my mom's sister couldn't drink regular milk and had to drink like chocolate milk. We don't still understand that. She got one chocolate milk. Miss Daniels is a warrior. I want to do a musical on Mrs. Daniels, and I think teachers are like that. They're warriors. Like, they just figure out like the way out of no way out of something that's just insane and crazy. And what you're saying is, what I have learned by having to homeschool my kids is that teachers are amazing. They do so much with so little, and I need to unite with them. And that's going to be different for you.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully different for everybody.
Mm.
You know, what can come out of this is a level of production that I think is going to be more balanced. Because right now, when we think about our work, it's like, that's one, you know, and then we think, and then we validate it because if our work is righteous or not, we're getting hopefully paid for our work. And then we're sustaining a system, an economic system for our families, you know? And so any excuse to overwork yourself will do, because, but then what you realize is your system is broken because every day you've been sending your kids off to school and you've been neglecting that system. You haven't put yourself in, you haven't involved yourself. And when the teachers are like, we're going to go on strike and we're in agony, you're a little angry at them because now who's going to keep your kids? Mm-hmm. You know? And so I think that's one thing. There's all kinds of systems like that operating. And I think if people are getting a chance to meet them. In our parable path that we're going to do, we have like a workshop on facilitation and that we're going to do. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to do that is I spoke with someone who's a facilitator in Boston, and they were talking about how much work they can end up doing being a facilitator. And these are people who help other organizations or other, you know, groups of people learn how to have a practice around doing their work efficiently. You know, so in other businesses, this might be consultants or, you know, something like that. They call it facilitation. And there's all different kinds of facilitators for anything you can imagine. And I have several friends who are facilitators. They're wonderful and awesome. And they're also like mostly exhausted working all the time. And so this is going to be like a check-in on facilitators. You know, how are you creating a practice for other people when your practice is actually overwhelming you and your life? Yep. And is this proper sacrifice, right? Harriet Tubman did excellent sacrifice. You know, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, did excellent sacrifice. You know, are we actually doing excellent sacrifice, or are we just wearing ourselves out and creating inside of the same system that says like, yes, work, make money. And even if you're also doing beautiful shows, and even if you're also helping somebody organize their office better, are you actually doing the same thing that is an exhaustive, you know, system that will eventually make you sick and, you know, not happy?
Yeah. I really love that notion of excellent sacrifice and what it means. It's, you know, there's the corollary in the sort of business world, work smart versus working hard, but this excellent sacrifice, because so many of us think that we are doing the thing to sacrifice for the people, when it probably is perpetuating the other dynamic of being in the system, just doing more work, but to what end? And so to challenge ourselves to think about what is the excellence in the, you know, what is the excellent sacrifice that we are committed to as warriors in arts and culture, or warriors as organizers, or whatever our calling might be. This notion of excellent sacrifice is one that's really, really interesting to sort of to think about, and challenged by it at the same time, you know?
Heck yeah.
I had this I had to turn myself inside out, Toshi, after our phone call. I think I might have mentioned it a little bit on the call, but in talking about things that are being disrupted and kind of listening to the disruption and then how to move. You know, theater people are trained that the show must go on. Like that's our thing. That's what defines us. Like postmen always deliver the mail. Our shows always happen. And then even this notion of how do we respond as a community. Responding as a community for me in all my years of community organizing has been about coming together, wrapping ourselves as tightly together as we can, and standing, particularly with the afflicted or the at-risk, as closely as we can, and holding ourselves together like that. And those are not excellent sacrifices, particularly they're called into question in this moment. You know, a couple of years ago at ArtsEmerson in Boston, we had all that horrible snow. We had like 10 feet of snow in 11 weekends. And our instinct was always, no, let's save the show, let's do the show. If the T's not shut down, we're going to do the show. And even during that time, many of our staff members would say, but this is what it's going to take me to get in to be your usher. This is what it's going to take for me to be backstage when that happens. It's like, yes, you're in the theater, do it, do it, do it. And this one finally, like, smack, brick in the head, like, no, actually, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. That's the actual expression of love, right? That's the expression of togetherness. Don't do it. And the same with standing, like you gave me this phrase, and I'll show you here. It's what we put up on the marquee, if you can see. This is like now being broadcast to all of Boston from our marquee, is that we're standing
wow.
for now. But again, that notion, when I think about it as excellent sacrifice, I really was asking people to do this other sacrifice, because of all just instinctive, and sort of the wheel I was on. It's been really remarkable to be turned inside out. Both of those core value, they're not values, they're instincts. They were actually counter to my values in the end.
So this idea of the show must go on is like, I think it's also kind of an idea of being stuck, and we have several like long-term theatrical institutions like Broadway and, and other ones around the country, places and around the world, been around for 100 years or 150 years. And we have structures of like how they exist and how they're created. And we're at a time where most of them need to change. Like one technology and one what people want to do and one generations, what about our ways of communicating and creating that have become mainstream? What do we want to keep and why? Mm-hmm. And we're at a time where all of it could go away. Like it could just all go away.
Absolutely.
And so this idea of like, Octavia's idea of change, or, the idea of meeting where you actually are, the idea of serving your community. I think theaters are so uniquely designed to be a real-time holder of their communities and their communities' creations and their communities, like, whenever I like in a place where I have to pitch parable, I was just like, well, whether you do it or not, consider yourselves like a 21st century mass meeting holder. Consider your building and what it can offer your community. I mean, I would be like, you got Wi-Fi, you got air conditioning, you got like all these rooms, like what could you do? And I think like looking at this place where we have to stop, all of these theaters are closing. And they actually have an opportunity to kind of restructure the little buzzy things that have been on their minds and the systems that they've created. And like one day I was like, so people ask me about Parable and Broadway all the time. And I was like, well, if it is, I'm not going to be in it because I'm not singing 8 shows a week. But I was like, why is it like that? like maybe that worked, like back in the day, but does that really work now? Like so many good shows come up and close because they just can't sell that many tickets. And I'm like, why is it like that? And why isn't there more innovation of putting more than one show in a theater at a time? And why isn't like everybody's not blessed like you guys are with 4 theaters, but why isn't, you go to Europe, we did a show at the Paris Opera House that's old as crap. You send your set to the Paris Opera House, they take it apart and put it back together and learn how to put your set in a closet and break it down and set it up in 2 hours. And I was like, why don't we have more innovation like around that? Why does there have to be one show in a theater per week? Why can't there be 2 shows? Why can't it be a 1-person show and a big show? Why can't it be all these things? And I don't know, I just think about stuff like that. Like anything, change is really difficult if you're very, very happy with where your structure is, or if you're very, very used to what your structure is. But I think what we tend to do is hold on to like whatever you think that structure is. And as it lessens and lessens and gets harder and harder, or, you know, gets more and more difficult, or gets more and more violent, or more and more restrictive, or more and more, we're like, let's just keep it as much as we can. And that is not going to work. We have an abundance of opportunity right now, and it will shift everything, and you will not land in the same place you were, and you will not be comfortable with all of the things that come out of it. But to actually be a participant in change, to be eyes open, you know, heart expanded participant in change, even uncomfortable change, is what we all need. It's definitely what theater needs. It's what we all need. And it is what this particular time is calling for. So don't get used to, and don't say you have to sustain, you know, the election in a certain kind of way. You know what we're going to do? We're going to fight. We're really going to get mad and not vote for Biden, because that's like, you know, I don't like him and I prefer Bernie or Elizabeth Warren or whatever other 70-year-old white person is running for president. Come on, y'all. Okay.
Just name them, right?
These young people forward, please.
Wow.
You know, please. Like, really, let's have some change, you know? But you have to be a movement-oriented person and not a, what do you call it? You know, an election-oriented person. Like, you know, that these campaigns happen and then get involved, and, you know, change change will happen regardless, and we're all experiencing that. And last November, if you had told me Parable Boston would be canceled and I'd be sitting on a Zoom with y'all talking about like this, I just would be like, really? Wow. Like, and I believe anything can happen. So I would probably be like, well, I guess it's possible, but I certainly didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, Tuesday, March 10th, we didn't see it coming. So that's how close we got. You know, one thing you're saying, David, you always talk about being in service. You know, our job is being in service. And I've always used the frame for myself of being a steward of resources as opposed to the owner of them. And I think part of the mind shift that you're talking about, Toshi, and hopefully we can get there, we have to stop feeling like we own these things and understand that we're taking care of these things for the planet and so like nobody owns that theater. Yes, someone owns the theater. Of course, there's a lease and they pay taxes on it and it's in their name, but they're the stewards of it. And how does it best serve?
Yeah.